Just love fine dining, you're in the right place. Come experience the crown jewel of South Point restaurants, Michael's Gourmet Room.
Welcome.
With over 600 different types of wines and magnificent dishes prepared tableside, you'll revel in the rich classic Vegas decor and the best black tie service in the world. This intimate gourmet room has earned accolades galore. Come to Michael's Gourmet Room for an unforgettable dining experience. Another famous restaurant is the Silverado Steakhouse, where you'll find the charm and service that discerning patrons require. From top quality steaks and chops to fresh seafood and desserts, you'll love the award-winning wine list and menu at Silverado Steakhouse. Steak lovers have even more options with primarily prime rib. Catering to hearty appetites, the menu features a variety of flavorful prime rib cuts, dry-aged to ensure tenderness, and then seasoned and slowly roasted. Although prime rib is our specialty, it's not the only thing on the menu. There's something for everyone. And if you're craving a taste of Italy, come experience delicious Italian cuisine and the attentive service at Don Vito's. Our culinary team starts with the freshest ingredients and transforms them into traditional favorites. And don't forget Italian desserts. Don Vito's. Savor the taste of Italy. Finally, if sushi is more your style, join us at the popular Zenshin Asian restaurant and sushi bar, where we're serving up the freshest sashimi, nigiri, and sushi rolls. And beyond the sushi, an exciting contemporary Asian cuisine menu. Plus a variety of specialty drinks, Japanese and domestic beer, wine, and sake. Balance your hunger with Zenshin.
It's Sports by the Book at the South Point Studio. Here's Jeff Parles and Alex White.
Happy Saturday, everyone. Welcome in at Sports by the Book on a college football day. Only a few weeks to go in this college football regular season. I'm Jeff Parles. She is Alex White. Got a pretty good day in front of us, Alex.
Yes, we do. Yeah. Once again, some SEC games that could end up being chaotic.
Chaotic, high-end, however we want to. But I think all may apply by the end of the day on the SEC. Of course, we'll get the Bama and LSU, and we'll get the Georgia and Ole Miss. It's a shame DJ Lagway's not 100%, but we'll get to that game a little bit. Well, not even on a little bit. We'll get to that game second on the list here today. We'll also see our friend Vinny Magliulo about 40 minutes from now. But let's get to it. The final month of the college football season rolling along here. 5 weeks in November this year, rarity. So this is week 2 of it. As we'll know, we'll get the clear picture as we go along for the college football playoff. We start in rotation number order again. These games are a little bit out of order time-wise. Don't blame us. Blame the people that make the rotation numbers. We start with Pitt hosting Virginia. Pitt got exposed last week. They were pummeled in Dallas by SMU. And now they return home to take on a Virginia team that, if you're looking, Alex, I think we can start doing the bowl dance here for a lot of these teams with a month to go. And Virginia is one of those teams they're going to be dancing into a bowl game. They kind of need to win today because they're going to be a huge dog next week at Notre Dame. They're going to be a nice-sized dog at home against SMU 2 weeks from now. They'll be an underdog in Blacksburg against Virginia Tech as well. Winning 2 of these last 4 games is going to be very difficult for them to get to a bowl game, but this might be the most winnable game of the bunch. From 7.5 down to 7 on this one, and a 57 on the total with Pitt, of course, favorite here.
I've heard some people say that last week could be the start of a spiral for Pittsburgh, right, who was very fortunate and pretty lucky in their early games. I made them 10 here, so I couldn't do anything. I don't trust them enough to lay a whole touchdown here against Virginia, but I mean, both these teams have been covering this year, so that makes it a little tough too. Pittsburgh 6-2 against the spread, and then Virginia comes in 5-2-1, even though they do just have a 4-4 record. So nothing for me in this one. I lean to the over a little bit. I've been talking about Pittsburgh and how fast they play, and if you look at the numbers, Virginia also plays very quick, 29th quickest, 25.4 seconds per play. So a little bit lean to the over here at 57. I made it 61, but I didn't bet this game.
7.5 I took. Still think it's okay with 7. I would think that Pitt spiral is more than in play. Now, The question is, will it start today or will it start next week when they have to play Clemson and Louisville back-to-back, two teams that are ranked behind them in the college football playoff that I think are pretty clearly better than both of them, even though you might have an argument on Clemson because Clemson still hasn't beaten anyone good this year, and they were pretty well smashed at home by Louisville a week ago. All right, we got multiple shades of orange in this next game, actually. You don't think of Florida as a predominantly orange team, but the orange helmet. They'll go to Austin and take on Texas. So here's the deal this morning for Florida. Up to 22.5, was as low as 21.5, was as high as 23.5. So DJ Lagway, of course, left last week's game with a hamstring injury. He's a game-time decision here today, which makes me think he's probably not going to be able to go. But if he's able to go, I don't see how he's effective. And less than 100% on the road against this defense, where this is the second straight week Florida's going to be playing a high-end defense. They, of course, played Georgia last week. This is very tough to ask Florida, even at a huge number like this, to cover this number. But it is 22.5 in a conference game where it's not a completely ridiculous mismatch, Alex.
And you talked about it yesterday. I mean, you have to give Billy Napier some credit here and that turnaround that he has done with this Florida team. But I really don't trust them in this spot. It is a shame to see Lagway go down last week. I mean, they were winning going into halftime and really would have liked to see what happened at the end of that game against Georgia. If Florida could have pulled up that upset. But yeah, that hamstring injury looked bad. So for them to say that he's a game time decision, I'm in the same boat as you. I don't believe that he will be 100% here. So nothing for me. If anything, I would think this is one of those games that Texas just runs away with.
Well, the whole market just bet this game over. So the whole market just moved from 47.5 to 48. So legitimately, look at Sean with the Sean and Dridog with the up-to-the-date updates there. But legitimately, the whole market, as we were talking, just moved to 48. So I don't know. This doesn't scream Texas scoring 40 points this game. Florida's defense has been good enough. Quite frankly, they should have beat Tennessee a few weeks ago and held Tennessee's offense in check in Knoxville a little less than a month ago. All right, let's go keep it at 9 a.m. now. We're in some of these 9 a.m. games. Cincinnati will welcome West Virginia. No Garrett Green again for the Mountaineers, but West Virginia without Garrett Green. Now, I think we have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt because Arizona has been a shocking dumpster fire this year. This is 5. This does feel like a lot of points, even without Green today, even with the backup for the second consecutive game. It's Nico Marichal, who actually played pretty well in that game against Arizona. At 5, I would take with West Virginia. Be a little careful, though, because it is the backup quarterback. It's a second consecutive road game. Both of these teams it is a geographical rivalry game as well. But it would be only taking the 5 would be the only way I'd look to play this, Alex.
So you mentioned it at the top of the show, looking out for those teams that do have 5 wins, trying to get that 6 wins. Cincinnati is in that boat, right? 5 and 3 right now. So there's nothing I could do here in this one. I did make this closer to a pick if Garrett Green was in. I think he's probably about 3 points better. So not enough here, but close with that 5 points. I'm with you. I lean to the dog here. And you brought up Nico Marichal. He did do good, 18 of 22, 198 yards and 2 touchdowns. So we'll see what he can do in this one. But other games I chose to bet on besides these first 3.
Cincinnati, realistically speaking, has to split their 2 home games to get to win number 6. If this game this weekend and they end the season with TCU at home, they're going to be favored in both of those games. So after that, they have the 2 Farmageddon teams back-to-back on the road in Iowa State and Kansas State. So good luck winning those games. Even though Iowa State very easily could have lost to 2 very much inferior teams the last 2 games at home for them, and they did last week. Oh, how about this segue? Speaking of Iowa State, they're up next on the board here. This is a 12:30 Pacific kick in Kansas City against the Kansas Jayhawks. Now, this is the game I've actually, other than the 2 Primo games, this is the game that I've been texted by people trying to figure out what's going on the most this week. And here's what I'll say. This game's in Kansas City. Remember, Kansas is playing all their home games at Arrowhead this year because Memorial Stadium's under renovation in Lawrence. Kansas is 2-6. Iowa State historically is one of the best travelers, period, to Kansas City for the Big 12 basketball tournament. there's no reason to think, even with the loss last week, that this will not be a mega travel game for Iowa State, making the short trek from Ames to KC. I think this plays as an Iowa State home game today, honestly. But I understand the move because Iowa State has been looked at by the market as one of the luckiest teams in college football so far this year. I think they're a little bit better than the other luck boxes, maybe not BYU, but they're better than Pitt because they at least have two big-time targets on the outside. A wide receiver. Their defense is good enough. It's better than Pitt's. Kansas, you could argue, has been the most unlucky team in the Big 12 so far this year. 2-6 is basically the worst they possibly could have done so far through 8 games. They've, in one-score games this year, the Kansas Jayhawks are 0-5. 0-5. And their 6th loss, they were leading going to the fourth quarter, and they lost by 11. So they have just had no ability to close games. I get the move, but with that said, I think the move in the end makes this more of a look to Iowa State laying 2.5. I'm not going to do it, but and also too, Kansas playing for the season. If they lose this game, no chance of the bowl at 2-7.
I did it. I laid the 2.5 here with Iowa State, and I was okay with the 3 even. Jeff, if you look at these, I mean, this is over like a 4-week span, so of course there's going to be adjustments, but Iowa State was a 16-point favorite on the road against Houston. Kansas 3 weeks ago was a 4.5-point favorite at home against Houston. So you're telling me that we had to adjust that much now to only be here at a 2.5-point favorite against Kansas? I know they've covered in their last 2 games and they've looked a lot better, and Jalen Daniels is starting to come back into form, and he was just a mess at the beginning of the year, throwing a lot of interceptions. But I think that this is an Iowa State game. And as you mentioned, they travel well. They have the better defense. Defense travels. I mean, they're 20th ranked right now in total yards allowed. So I was fine laying under 3 here.
It's interesting you bring up the comparison on the line here because that is an interesting look. The only reason I'm going to play devil's advocate real quick on that, the midst of that stretch that Houston was on in those back-to-back games, got outscored 54-0 by Cincinnati and Iowa State 2 straight weeks. And then after that, they've won 3 out of 4. Yeah. They've actually played some reasonable football. The only loss in there was getting destroyed by Kansas at Arrowhead. Since then, I mean, they won on the road in Fort Worth. They beat Utah. They stunned Kansas State, which really makes Kansas State Big 12 championship or bust at this point in order to make the college football playoffs. So, I do see your angle, though. That does make sense. That does feel like it's and it was Iowa State on the road, no less.
Right.
And Kansas at home.
Exactly.
And it's that big of a move on that. All right, let's go to another 9 a.m. game. Georgia Tech welcomes Miami. It looks like Haynes King is going to go today.
Ooh.
So this is the market's been weird on this game, where I would have expected a little bit more of a move down. We did see it a little bit earlier this morning, but it got popped back to 10. At most shops. It's 9.5 behind us. So if you like Miami, this is the best number you're going to find. Canes, again, they're going to be almost double digits, if not double digits, in every remaining of their games. They're going to be a huge favorite next week against Wake Forest, or 2 weeks from now. They'll probably be around a touchdown at Syracuse, would be my guess, at the Dome the final week of the season. If you can get 10, though, with Georgia Tech, I wouldn't mind it. The only thing is, be willing to try to middle this game if you bet Georgia Tech, especially if you get a scenario like last week where Miami is behind in the third quarter and then ends up racking off 28 consecutive in order to cover that game. Matt's wrong. 32 consecutive to cover that game after being 10 in the third and then winning by 22. I would only look to the dog here, but I'm not particularly strong in this game, Alex.
That is a huge upgrade for them, getting Haynes King back. I mean, he was so good to start the season, completing 71% of his passes, 8.2 yards per attempt, 8-to-1 ratio. So, I mean, that's like I mentioned, and I knew that this morning when I saw that go from 11 to 9.5, I figured he must be playing. But I was leaning towards Miami in this one, but I think you brought up a great point, and I'd look more for an in-game here. Wait for Miami. They've been such a slow starter, but then you can depend on this offense. They're number 1 right now in total yards per game, and that's mostly because of Cam Ward and the season that he is having. But I would look to Miami and trying to get a better number here in game.
So King is officially a game-time decision, but the trend was that he was going to play this week. If he doesn't, You just said it. It's a huge downgrade there in Philo, who played last time out against Virginia Tech. If King's unable to go, this is uphill battle for Georgia Tech, just to put it politely in this one. All right, let's keep it in the ACC. Duke will go to Raleigh. This is a triad game here against NC State. NC State's 3 at home, total 52. I don't know, Alex. I kind of want to bet Duke here, but after last week, I'm a little bit skittish where we're getting 21 points with Duke. We're up 10 in the third quarter in the game, and we don't cover. But NC State, this NC State team needs one more win for a bowl game. All the remaining games on the board are winnable. This is their final home game of the year. This is senior day for the Pack, but it would be a lean to the dog Blue Devils in this one against NC State.
I don't like going against Duke, and they have been pretty impressive this year. 6-3 straight up, 5-3-1 against the spread. But I do like NC State in this one. I liked them last week, mostly because of the situational spot against Stanford with them traveling an early game. But that 59-28 win just showed me how well NC State really is playing. Of course, no McCall. We have CJ Bailey now playing quarterback, who has done very well, especially coming off a bye, having more time in this offense. So I like NC State to get that 6th win here and cover this 3 points, pretty small number here. They also have home revenge from last year. And as you mentioned, home game senior night here. So I like NC State in this one.
Duke's already a bowl-eligible team, amazingly enough. We did not expect that. Projected to be one of the worst teams in the ACC, and NC State again. Grayson McCall's injury kind of really threw the season for a loop, even though Bailey's played better as he's gotten more reps this season.
Only Ann had Duke already as a bowl team.
Divine intervention every once in a while on that, Alex. All right, let's keep it in the ACC. We'll go to Chestnut Hill next. Boston College welcomes Syracuse, and this number's on the move this morning. There's a bunch of 3 in the market right now. Chris and Company have 2.5. All the money lines are plus 130 on Syracuse if you want a Boston College favorite in this game. Total 52, former Big East matchup, of course, in this one. This all comes down to what version of each quarterback are we getting in this game? What version of Castellanos are we getting? What version of McCord are we getting? Syracuse really pulled the rabbit out of the hat last week where they were getting their butt whipped early in that game and came from behind and won in overtime to get to win number 6 on the year. If we're playing the bowl dance with Boston College, they're 4-4, and your path gets progressively easier if you win this game. You're not winning next week in Dallas against SMU, but you do have 2 winnable home games to end the year against North Carolina and Pitt. But winning this game would go a long way to making those that route to a bowl much easier for Boston College.
And I lean that way with the Eagles here. They're coming off a bye. I think 2.5 is a pretty short number here. I did make them a 5-point favorite over Syracuse, which should say a lot because I've been on the Orange quite a bit this year, and I was last week, and I felt very fortunate to get that win in overtime against Virginia Tech. So, yeah, it's a lean to the favorite here, but I kind of picked my favorite selectively, and they didn't make the card. But lean, both teams are 4-4 against the spread. You brought it up about which quarterback are we going to see here, and I'm pretty disappointed in McCord. I thought he would be a lot more consistent. You talked about it early in the season. This is a better level of playing field for him, and he really has not stepped up consistently.
Oh, I just wonder how much the water got, for lack of a better word, poisoned by how awful of a game that was against Pitt in front of everyone.
Yeah.
The 5 interceptions, the 3 pick sixes. He was much better last week against Virginia Tech. It's kind of weird to say with Syracuse, going outdoors is a bad thing because of how miserable the weather is in Syracuse all year for the most part. But remember, it's a dome team. It's an indoor team. So I'm just curious how that goes. With that said, I do at the there are 3s out there. It would be a take of 3 for sure on Syracuse, and Boston College beats me, so be it. Or if the game lands 3, you win your bets, and I get my money back. It's a little bit better than taking points at 2.5 with the Orange on this one. All right, let's go to the horseshoe next, Alex. Bettors' favorite team, the Purdue Boilermakers, have been bet yet again this week from 38 to 37. Ohio State, of course, favored in this game. The Buckeyes the next 2 weeks before welcoming Indiana, of course, as we all expected, the big game of the year now for the Buckeyes. They played arguably the 2 worst teams in the Big Ten the next 2 weeks. Purdue, and then they go to Wrigley Field to take on Northwestern next week. I don't know, Alex. Do you want to lay 37 in a game where I'm questioning Ohio State's motivation because you just had the gigantic win in Happy Valley last week, and now you're going home and you see this awful team in front of you? I don't know. But Purdue is really that bad, though. So all these numbers feel right. I'm staying the hell away from this.
I'm with you. I made Ohio State a 40-point favorite here in this one, so nothing for me. But I was definitely not jumping in to take the points here with Purdue. I mean, they've been very disappointing in 2-6 against the spread. So I am a little surprised to see, but I mean, I guess it's just a number take. That is a lot of points here in a conference game.
Yeah, well, we've tried this with Purdue. Purdue's only covered twice so far this year in their 8 games. They covered week 1 against FCS Indiana State, and they covered again that Illinois game, which was an absurd game where they almost came. I mean, they're on 21 going to the fourth quarter and almost came out of that hole. Lost by a point at overtime. But other than that, I mean, they were 31 at home, 31-point underdogs at home against Oregon, got shut out 35-0. Wisconsin beat them 52-6. Just not a good team. Again, a little bit better because how bad can you get after 52-6 against that Wisconsin game for Purdue? All right, holy war time. Let's go to Salt Lake. This is quite the game for BYU, undefeated. Really, the roles are reversed in what we expected going into this year, Alex, where we all thought, Utah is going to be in the Big 12 title game in year 1, Big 12 betting favorite going into the year, BYU at the bottom of the league. It's reversed. BYU's undefeated. BYU's in the first rankings of the college football playoff, getting that 4 seed when they're ranked 9th because of the way the system works. Utah has some work to do to get to a bowl game. They're 4-4. Really, their season's falling apart because Cam Rising, yet again, just can't stay on the field, and his season is done. But, Alex, there's just something about these rivalry games where it's not a given, but when one team is having an overachieving season, like BYU is, and another team has just had this mess, but both teams are off the bye, the games are Rice-Eccles. This feels like a spot where Utah gets up for this game. And at some point, BYU is going to get beat by a team they should not get beat by. And this feels like the spot to go against BYU. I know it's the worst of the number at the moment. I took 4 earlier in the week. I still think it's good at 3. I still think the money line's good on Utah. I also think the under is good in this game. Because if this game goes over, Utah's going to lose. But so I like under. I like Utah money line here in this one, Alex.
I'm with you. I do think the under is a good play here. I mean, Utah 7-1 to the under this year. They still have a really good defense, and I think that is what is going to really show up in this one. I mean, if you look at their 4 losses, they gave up 23 to Arizona, and that was Arizona's one really good game with Noah Fafita. Arizona State, they held them to 27. That's when Cam Rising really couldn't even move out there, and they kept him in the game. TCU, they held them to 13. And then Houston last week, they lost that one 17-14. But I'm with you. I think this is the biggest game of the year now for them. Rivalry here, and I think they're going to play tough. And we know that Kyle Whittingham, he doesn't recruit guys that give up on him. So they will be in this game until the end. BYU, their defense has been very good as well. It's their offense that has struggled a little bit. They are just 49th right now, ranked in total yards per game. So I took the points here with Utah as well, and I didn't even get the best of the number. I jumped in here at 3 because I'm not really on the whole camp that BYU's not as good, and I do think that they could end up being undefeated and go into the Big 12 championship game undefeated, but I think Utah can hang around in this one. Low-scoring game. I like the under as well.
So Chris Andrews just texted both of us, Alex, and for games of the year, this is 21 with Utah favorite. So a nice 24-point difference. Paul Stone, of course, who we love, one of the best bettors there is in college football, took those 21 with BYU. All I can tell you is if that closing line value doesn't get there, then you take the lap at that point, more so than anything.
21 points here going in this game with the Cougars.
I would have thought that number was spot on when Chris and company made it back in the summer. All right, let's go to Boise State. The Broncos in the initial rankings of the college football playoff here, number 12. They host Nevada. Nevada's had quarterback issues the last few weeks because of injuries, especially to their guy Brendan Lewis, who was playing at a pretty good level before he got hurt. Genty and company are 23.5 in this game. They have taken the points with Nevada from 25 down to 23.5 on this one, Alex.
This is a little scarier bet for me. So can Nevada hold Boise State? Because I went under 60.5. I think that number is just a little bit high. So I need Nevada's defense to really step up in this one. What I have working for me is we know Boise State is going to run the rock, and they do it very well. They're 4th right now in rushing yards per game, and of course that is because of Ashton Genty. So I think as long as they can take up the clock and slow down this game, I think we can stay under that total. But 60.5 here, because I made it 55. I mean, I do think Boise will put some points on the game. I just don't know if Nevada can. So under 60.5 for me.
A lot more fortitude than I would in a Boise State versus a bad team total, Alex. Again, for Genty, one of the 4 realistic Heisman candidates at this point is Genty, it's Travis Hunter, and then the 2 quarterbacks, Cam Ward, and I would throw Dylan Gabriel in there as well as the realistic 4 that can still win the Heisman at this point here in 2024.
So we want Genty to go off in this game, actually, because he has been knocked for going against really good defenses. I think it was UNLV when his numbers kind of shot back up, and he still had 150 rushing yards, but that wasn't good enough against a good UNLV defense. So, yeah, I'm rooting for him. I'd like to see that with the running back get it, especially from a Big 5 conference.
Yeah, Genty, the low watermark was that UNLV game. Only in this game for Genty, it was $128.
$128.
Yeah,
okay.
The UNLV's defense did a good job on him. But again, difference with that is their quarterback Madsen is actually can play.
Yeah,
that I think that's the biggest difference in Boise from last year as opposed to this year. Why they're legitimate, I think they can win a playoff game if they get the right draw in round 1. All right, let's go to Tempe. Central Florida takes on Arizona State here, Alex. We're waiting on Scatterbo, the star Arizona State running back who may not play in this game, and the numbers telling you that. 2.5 now with the Sun Devils. This is a toggler all week. 2.5, 3.5, 3. 2.5, 3, 2.5, 3. This would be one of those where you just have to see the status of Scatterbo. If he's unable to go, then this is a stay off. If he is, I think this would be a slight lean to Arizona State at home, sub 3. Slight lean, nothing too crazy though.
I really wanted to take the points here with Central Florida, especially with what we saw from them last week. That was a huge win, 56-12 over Arizona. We know they made some coaching changes. But I can't go against Arizona State again. I've been doing it way too much this year, so it was a stay away for me. But at 3, I definitely was looking at the Knights here in this one.
Central Florida much better last week after the coaching changes, the quarterback changes. Malzahn's still there. He just gave up play calling duties and fired his DC. But it was much better. But how much of that was the fact that the Arizona Wildcats are as big of a disappointment as anyone in the entire country so far this year? All right, let's go to Lubbock. Now, this is a fascinating game with Colorado and Texas Tech. Both of these teams more than alive in the Big 12 chase. Texas Tech is coming off the big upset last week at Iowa State, winning outright as nearly a 2-touchdown underdog in Ames. Colorado didn't play last week. And Alex, at this number, I think we've gotten a little too far if you want to lay it with Colorado. There's even some 5 in the market. It's 4.5 on the Buffs on the road. It would only be a take of Texas Tech on the points. But as I've said now for about a month straight and brought it up again yesterday, Texas Tech is highly erratic.
Yes.
Highly erratic. And part of that is inconsistent quarterback play. Part of that is a very inconsistent defense. If you get the right end of the variance today, Texas Tech may very well win this game outright. If you get the wrong end of this variance, Colorado's going to win by 3 touchdowns. So it would be a lean to Texas Tech plus the points, but boy, it is very tough to bet them week in and week out.
It's hard, too. I agree. I think this number went too far. I was looking at it at 3, taking the points with Tech. You already brought it up, though. Which version of Texas Tech are we going to get here? I think this number is a little high, though, at 62. And that's because Colorado, we know that they can score, but it's really their defense that they changed this year and they have upgraded. So I think that they can hold Texas Tech down. I mean, I do think Taj Brooks will get the best of them in the running game, but I think that'll eat up the clock as well. So I think 62 is a little bit high, even though we've seen Texas Tech games and we've seen very high scoring ones, and I've been on the over for a lot of those. But 62, I think we're okay going under.
These are very, very good offenses when right. When right is the key word on Texas Tech, because Brooks is an elite running back. But again, it's a high number. That's a high number. I thought this was going to be like 59, so I had no problem going under at 62 on this one with what Alex is doing. Chris did take Texas Tech yesterday, so Red Raiders in this one against Colorado. All right, let's go to Missouri. Missouri against Oklahoma. This is the matchup of quarterback problems here in this game. So I would be shocked if we see Brady Cook today. I'd be shocked. If he does go, could very easily be what happened 2 weeks ago at Alabama, where he's able to go for a little bit and then just can't do it anymore because of the high ankle sprain. And he's also dealing with a hand injury on top of it now. So he's basically walking wounded at this point if it's Brady Cook. If it's Drew Pine in this game, and yesterday at 42.5, I thought this was a great under. At 41.5, I still think it's quite good. I said yesterday, Alex, neither team's getting a 20. So I like this under, even at 41.5. On the side, if you made me play it, I would take the 3 with Mizzou, because I'm just not sure Oklahoma should be favored on the road in the SEC except if they were in Starkville against Mississippi State at this rate.
And that's where I think we're a little bit off on this, right? Last week we saw Oklahoma. They had their cupcake game against Maine. They won 59-14. So maybe this is a little bit of an overreaction here, even without Brady Cook. I think getting 3 points here is probably the right way to go with Mizzou. I stayed off of this SEC game, though. But just to mention, and I'll bring it up again with the next 2 games we're going to go over, but underdogs, SEC versus SEC this year, 29-13. So, I mean, this conference it's been very tough. A lot of parity here. So I would lean to taking the dog here with the Tigers.
I'll just say this, Alex. If Oklahoma loses this game, their last 2 games are Bama and LSU. Good luck getting to win 6 if that's the case. So kind of a gotta-have-it spot for OU against a very much banged-up Missouri team. Even though there's positive injury news for Mizzou. They get Noel back, their number 1 running back. So an opportunity there. If Mizzou just wants to run the ball 40 times in this game, it might have to be the case in this one for the Tigers against Oklahoma. All right, we get to one of the 2 mega games here today. Number 3, Georgia. Number 16, Ole Miss in our college football playoff rankings. The Dogs, 2-point favorites on the road against Ole Miss, who are the underdogs in this game. Mm-hmm. So this is an elimination game for Ole Miss. They lose, see you later, you're done. If you win, Ole Miss is in, I think, even though they were behind a few other teams in the SEC, I think they're in amazing shape to make the college football playoff, because they only have 2 games left after this, and it's Florida and Mississippi State. So it's 2 games they should win and will be relatively large favorites in. Carson Beck in these big games have been bad. Now, they got away with it against Texas. They got away with it last week against Florida. They didn't get away with it against Alabama. Beck's thrown 11 interceptions this year. Yep. He's thrown 8 of them in the bigger games they've played so far this year. There's no reason to think it won't happen again, Alex, because this Ole Miss defense, we all talk about how great that offense is. This Ole Miss defense is underrated. They have an elite pass rush. They have a more than good enough secondary. I just don't think Georgia, it's so weird to say with Georgia, they're awesome. There's no arguing that. But they don't have the horses they've had during this run with the 2 titles and then last year, where if they won the SEC championship game, they very well have won the title yet again for a 3rd consecutive year. I like the dog. I like Ole Miss. I like them outright. I think they get this thing done and put themselves squarely back in the college football playoff discussion with a win here today.
I'm with you. I took the 3 early on. I'm okay here with the 2, or if you do want to take them on the money line. But, I mean, this is Lane Kiffin's best chance of beating the Bulldogs here. So I think he's going to have his team ready to go. You brought it up about Carson Beck, though. I mean, that is the biggest concern. 8 interceptions in the last 3 games, Jeff. And then you have 1 before that. He had a nice clean game. That was against Auburn. And then he had 3 interceptions against Alabama the week before. So, yeah, it's not the same. I mean, last year his ratio was 24-6. This year he's 17 to 11, 17 passing touchdowns, 11 interceptions already on the year. So something's off with this Georgia team. I mean, we saw it last week. They were down to Florida in the first half. I think Ole Miss will be ready for this one. I like the dog as well.
So Georgia next week gets Tennessee. So this is a brutal stretch. 3 straight games, biggest rival, even though Florida's not Florida of old. Again, Lagway didn't get hurt. I thought Florida was on their way to upsetting Georgia last week. And then Ole Miss and Tennessee. It's no gimme. Georgia got to split these 2 games. They'll get in the college football playoff at 10-2, but they go 9-3. I don't think anyone's getting in with 3 losses this year. Really don't think that's possible here this year in college football. All right, let's go to an intriguing matchup that I don't think any of us thought would be particularly good going into this year. Vanderbilt welcomes South Carolina. Now, Alex, we talked about this at length yesterday, me, Chris, and Vinny. I'm confused by the way this game's been bet.
I keep checking the injury report.
Yeah, same thing. I legitimately went to Diego Pavia not playing. Now, I think both of these teams are good. I think they're both good, solid, top 25 caliber football teams at this point. I don't think we can argue that anymore on Vanderbilt. Just look at what they've done so far this year. Other than that perplexing one against Georgia State, they have exceeded the market in every single game basically this year, except for that one and that Ball State game. See, just can't be playing non-SEC teams, obviously, for Pavia and company. This opened 3.5. It's now 6.5 with South Carolina favored in Nashville. I thought this was good at 3.5 on Vanderbilt. I definitely think this is good at 6.5 on the Commodores. This is a weird spot for South Carolina, too. They just had a gigantic win last week against A&M. I think we're in the same boat on this one, Alex. We both like the dog here in this game.
You said Pavia is playing, right?
Yeah, he's in.
Yeah, and it was a little bit of a probable throughout the week, but that's nothing to really, we know he's a little banged up, but I think he'll be up for this.
If he can walk, he's playing.
So the Sharps really like Purdue, and I think they just really want to fade Vandy. And I think that has more to do with it than anything. And I know they had a big win last week against Auburn, but I'm in the same boat as you. I think South Carolina is in line for a bigger letdown here with upsetting Texas A&M. They were the last undefeated SEC team. So, yeah, I think 6.5 is a great number here with the dog.
Just look at Vandy in the conference games this year. At the time when they lost to Missouri, it was like, whoa, what's wrong with Missouri? No, it's that Vanderbilt was a real team at that point. Then obviously the historic upset over Alabama. They go on the road, beat Kentucky as nearly a 2-touchdown underdog. Texas, huge underdog at home, cover pretty easily when it's all said and done. Last week was another one. It's like, all right, you give me 7.5 points against Auburn, who can't beat anyone by margin. Sign me up. Vandy wins outright. So, again, this Commodore team has just continually exceeded expectations. And it just, look, sometimes you just can't get to the right number on a certain team because of how low they were going into the year. And that's just kind of what's happened with Vanderbilt. And again, we both like South Carolina on this desk.
Right, yes.
We both think we both of us think they're a very good football team that is underrated. But we're both in the same camp here. This has been wild movement on South Carolina. I honestly think next week's the week you want to be on the Gamecocks because they're going to host Missouri next week in a game that is the battle of the 2 Columbia teams. And Missouri is going into that game banged up more likely than not. So that would be the week, especially if Vandy pulls an upset. We might get a better number on South Carolina next week in Williams-Brice in the SEC. All right, Alex, let's go to Denton, Texas next because, that's what we're doing. And really the big news here, more so than anything, and you see that number spiked back to 6.5. Guess who's back? Bryson Daly. Army's quarterback is back in this game. So that's why this line's really moved. Now I'll ask you this question, though, Alex. Is the move too much? Ooh. Because now we're at 6.5 with Army on the road against a team that, quite frankly, if you look at Army's schedule this year, there is a legitimate, actually, you know what? It's not even a legitimate argument. It is the argument. This is the best team they played so far this year. And again, I don't think North Texas is all that great. I think their defense is awful. But this is a step up in class, and it's on the road for Army. So I'm just curious, do you think this move is too much now to 6.5?
I do. I took the 3 points yesterday on a contest because I thought that Bailey was out for sure. So that's not looking great. But I made this game a pick 'em regardless with him in. So I do think North Texas can hang around in this one. This is a very good offense. They like to play fast. They're very up-tempo, one of the quickest teams in the nation. So, I think as long as they can keep Army on their toes, they can hang around in this one. 67. Were you expecting that total for an Army game?
So it's interesting on that because I thought that was a typo when I first saw it earlier in the week. So like I said, North Texas's defense is horrific. But they do have an offense. Mm-hmm. So really it's just a question is how quickly is Army going to score? That's what it comes down to. Is this absurd of a total this high? Because Army could just have one of those games where like, 14 play, 75-yard, 6.5-minute drives. Yep. Like that. When you have a total that high, it kills you. Forget it, they had to tee it off with a touchdown. A drive over 6 minutes, 7 minutes, you're in big trouble at a total that high. So be careful. Now, with that said, could this game absolutely end 51-42, something like that? Absolutely. 100%. Because North Texas's defense is that bad. And I don't think Army's defense is really that good. We just don't know against higher end competition.
So now at 6.5, are you jumping in?
No, I'm not. I'm staying out of it. I need to see how this looks in game. This is Service Academy games, unless if they're playing each other, are more likely than not for me in-game games because I need to see how the opposing defense responds to it. Now, if you want to go against Air Force every week this year, I can't blame you. But especially with Army, who has made it pretty clear at this point that they're the best of the 3 service academies now. So, didn't expect that going into the year.
A little spiral for Navy.
Yeah, Navy with 2 bad losses in a row. All right, Oklahoma State, TCU. Let's be quick on this game because this is a season from hell for the Pokes. Up to 10.5 with another ridiculously high total of 67. Kind of like the over in this game, honestly, even at the obscenely high total, because I hate both of these defenses. Just a matter on the Oklahoma State end. Are you going to be able to score enough to get this game into the 70s? So it would be a lean to the over here, Alex.
I think they will. They have been in most of these games. Their offense is there. Their defense is just really bad. They're like 132nd right now in total yards allowed out of 134. So it's really has not been good for the Cowboys. Stay away from me. I really don't like TCU, and I have to stop taking points here with Oklahoma State.
I'm happy you got to that conclusion on your own, Alex, because I was going to say, are you really going to do it?
Weeks.
Really going to do it again at Oklahoma State? Who just continually, really, it's kind of amazing just how much that's regressed. Where they were Team Luckbox last year,
yes,
and it's just forget. Going from Team Luckbox to just regular luck. They've went from Team Luckbox to obscenely bad luck. Just the overcorrection's been too much with Oklahoma State so far this year. All right, now we go to a few Big Ten games in a row, Alex. Let's go to New Jersey.
I'm sorry, I forgot to put it on here, too. I do like Oregon State hosting San Jose State as well.
Oregon State, San Jose State, 3 with the Beavers at home against the Spartans in that one.
Yep.
The off the board play. Well, not off the board, but the off our list plays that Alex likes. Which, by the way, last time we did that, Alex went 4-0. So yeah, you don't have to. Have faith. Have faith.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, let's go to New Jersey next. Rutgers hosting Minnesota. So Kyle Monangai, Rutgers' best player and their star running back, is not playing in this game. So, and Rutgers, by the way, just moved to 6.5 everywhere, including the South Point on this game. Legitimately, as we were just bringing the game up. Look, you look at Rutgers' defense over the last month plus. That's been the alarm bells. We knew their offense was going to struggle to score this year just because they were very one-dimensional. But you look at what has happened to them since that win at Nebraska, where it was 14-7 and no one moved the ball. Wisconsin beat them 42-7. Wisconsin averaged 7 yards per play in that game. The week after that, well, maybe UCLA is a little bit better. Well, UCLA is definitely better than we realized. But 35-32 lost to UCLA, 7 yards per play for UCLA in that game. Then, in that ridiculously late start, the last time we saw Rutgers against USC, 8.7 yards per play. So for a team that's known in Rutgers for running the football and relying on their defense has failed them immensely the last 3 games. Now, we do have a weird, because Alex, I know you love a good revenge spot here. We have a weird one of these today with Ethan Kaliakmanis, who's the quarterback at Minnesota the last few years, is now the quarterback of Rutgers. So I'm just curious here, even without Monangai, their star, would you still look at Rutgers here plus 6.5 at the best of the number this week? I can tell you I would not, because I just don't trust that defense at the moment.
Okay, so take this for what you want, because I've been pretty wrong on both these teams, right? I was on Illinois last week against Minnesota. I was on Rutgers against Wisconsin.
You and I both.
As a number play, yes, I do like Rutgers here taking the 6.5. And the other thing that made me a little nervous is Minnesota's the second best team against the spread after Indiana so far this year. They're 7-1-1 covering the spread. So they have been very good. But with a week off, bye week, I think that Rutgers can get their defense right. It is a low total here. I think they can hang around in this one. So, yes, I took the 6.5 here.
Yeah, and the Monangai injury really scares me. Yeah. I'm just concerned they're not going to be able to move the ball. Now, if Monangai was in, I would say this total's too low. But with Monangai out, you gotta steer clear at least to that total at 44.5. All right, let's go to the Pacific Northwest, the good old conference matchup. The Terrapins and the Ducks. Oregon, number one in the AP, number one in the college football playoff. If they go undefeated, they're getting the number one seed and getting that for that New Year's Day at the Rose Bowl. Because we do know that now that Big Ten champ goes to the Rose Bowl, SEC champ goes to the Sugar, ACC champ goes to the Peach, and then Big 12 / remaining team, more likely than not, it would be basically Boise or Big 12 champ would go to the Fiesta Bowl automatically in that quarterfinal. This has been an interesting moving game, Alex. 25-26 initially. Now down the ladder to 23.5 on the Ducks at home with a total of 57 in this one.
I don't hate that taking the points here with the dog. I think that is a lot of points here for Maryland. And I know we started talking really good about them. Okay, maybe it wasn't such a big drop off, right, from quarterback position. And then they just kind of fell off a little bit. Coming off a bye, I do think Maryland can put up some points in this one. Now that total has gone down to 57, because last I saw it was 58, I will be betting over in this game, though. I think both teams will definitely be able to score, especially Oregon, of course, and as a 24-point favorite here. But Maryland, they're much better offensively than they are defensively, so I think they can put up some points here for us as well.
So Maryland, we're going bowl game hopping here from Maryland. The path is clear. You have these two ridiculous road games against Oregon and Penn State where you're going to be big underdogs in those two games. And then you have home games against Rutgers and Iowa. You're going to have to win both of those games at home, which, by the way, Iowa, I got to give UCLA some credit here. Because they were down 10-0 at the end of the first quarter and looked like it was going to be one of those classic Iowa games where their offense scores 20 points and UCLA could play 12 quarters and not score 20 points after one quarter. And then UCLA completely outplayed them the rest of the game at 120-17 last night. And at least now gives Deshaun Foster and company a path to make a bowl game in year one, which would be a hell of an accomplishment for how bad it looked early in the year. They have a home game against Fresno the final week, and they get USC, who is obviously going to be limping into that game at the Rose Bowl 2 weeks from now. So there's a path for UCLA to make a bowl. Winning outright as a 6.5-point underdog last night against Iowa.
Fresno's been very disappointing as well this year. We had them a lot higher in the Mountain West. You just brought up Penn State, and that reminded me of something from the last game, too. Minnesota does have Penn State up next, so it is a little bit of a weird sandwich spot for them, too. Big win over Illinois last week, got their 6th win to go bowling, and then they have Penn State up next, too.
Yeah, Minnesota does have a week off in between, so I don't know how much that changes.
It should, yeah.
A little bit, but it's still a weird sandwich spot, though. Penn State, we'll get to them in a moment. They try to bounce back after their loss a week ago to the Ohio State Buckeyes in that one. All right, Alex, a game we expected this to be the line going into the year, right? We expected Michigan and Indiana to be Indiana 14.5, right? We expected that. Yeah, I'm sure we all did. The Hoosiers this year have covered every game.
Except for the first one.
Except for week one, depending on the number.
Depending on the number.
They covered some. They didn't cover the closer because they were bet all the way to 24.5 in that game. Got them early. You got there, though.
Yeah.
Other than that, they covered every single game so far this year. And now you have 3 games to go. You have these two home games that are perennially winnable now because Michigan, look, I don't know how Michigan's going to be able to score in this game. You have Purdue, the final week of the season. I'm sure Indiana will be very willing to run that score up on Purdue that final week. There may not be a number large enough for that game. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that because Chris will then say, "Oh, I'll make it 100," and that's too large, obviously. But if Purdue is if Indiana's 30 in that game, I still think it'd probably be good on IU. That's how ridiculous that could be. But here you go today, Alex. 14.5 with IU, 48 the total. I kind of want to look to the total because I don't trust Michigan to score, but the problem is Indiana is capable of scoring 40 points against anyone. Will Johnson's not going to play today. They're Michigan's best defensive player. They're stud, top 10 NFL draft caliber defensive back. But Alex, this is just a train I'm unwilling to get in front of, even though I see 14 and a hook with Michigan. I'd be like, boy, that's tough to pass up. But I'm just not going to bother with that.
It is tough to pass up. But last week was my first week going against Indiana, more of a number play with Michigan State.
It looked good for a quarter.
It did look good for a quarter, but that's even the more impressive thing is those 47 unanswered points from Indiana after going down 10-0. So I'm with you. It's a little bit of a lean to the under and about Michigan's defense here if they can hang around in this one. But you got to be careful with Indiana totals. So nothing for me in this one, but a lean to the under.
Let's go to Happy Valley next. Penn State, of course, last week losing to Ohio State. Now they welcome Washington. 12.5-point favorites on an Indy Lions right now. And all I'll just say here, Alex, is this is a scenario where you have home road splits with the Washington Huskies that are as bad as anyone in the entire country this year. Where Washington, at home, they haven't lost at Husky Stadium. Yeah, they have lost in Seattle. I know, but that game was at Lumen, which is the home of the Seahawks, the Apple Cup game. But at home, they're undefeated. On the road, they haven't won yet. And if you look at the road games, they lose to Rutgers in a game they dominate, but they find a way to lose. They give up 40 to Iowa on the road. They lose to Indiana with the backup quarterback in there. Now you're going on the road to take on a ticked-off team that just lost a game that, quite frankly, they probably should have won against Ohio State last week, or at least should have gotten the game to overtime at least. 12.5, I would be very much willing to lay this with Penn State in this spot.
That's the only way I would play it if you made me bet this. I would lay the points here with Penn State. You mentioned it coming off of their first loss of the season. I think they'll be up and ready for this one. That is alarming. That's pretty crazy about Washington's home and away split. I didn't realize it was that bad.
It's jarring. They haven't lost
Jeff Fish is a really good coach. He was up against it this year, right? You got a team, lost a lot of guys to the NFL. First year there at Washington. So
now, granted, I will say this: Washington's opponents at home have been Weber State, Eastern Michigan, Northwestern, Michigan, and USC. So they haven't exactly played murderer's row up at Husky Stadium so far this year. But again, it's just not. Just again, when you're replacing 20 starters, it's hard. And making a bowl game is a good accomplishment here for Jed Fish. All right, before we bring Vinny in, we'll let Vinny get set up while we're talking about this game. It's not the most intriguing game at Neyland Stadium. Tennessee is a huge favorite against the SEC's worst in Mississippi State. 26. Now, I'll just say this. This is moved from 24 to 26. Let's keep in mind here with Tennessee. What does Tennessee do against clearly inferior opponents? They beat the crap out of them, for lack of a better phrase.
Yep.
And again, I don't love laying this sort of lumber in an SEC game, but Mississippi State profiles a lot closer to a mid-major team than they do a SEC team this year. I would only lay it with Tennessee, and I'd probably see if I can get a 14 first half. I don't know if I can because it's mostly 14.5 because Tennessee has been slow starting this year. This feels like a game where they get their offense going in the first half. It would be Tennessee only for me, even at these bloated numbers.
I like that angle, first half there. I did write down Tennessee minus 24. It's right here on my sheet, but I missed it. Now 26, I kind of think you missed the best of the number.
Tough.
But you're right about Mississippi State. They have been surprisingly competitive in some of these SEC games, though, and so just keep that in mind, too. But Yeah, I mean, we know Tennessee's really going to try and run up the score in this one. I like first half.
It is a weird look ahead, not a weird, but it is a look ahead spot because Georgia's on deck next week for Tennessee. So that is the only hesitation here in this one with the Vols. All right, we'll bring Vinny in because we get to start him with a game that we expected this line going into the year for this one. Alex, let's get your thoughts first because Notre Dame, Florida State, which a game we thought was going to be for a playoff spot potentially, is not that. Florida State is one win on the season. 24.5, 25 out there on this game now on Notre Dame at home against Florida State.
Another one that I debated taking the under here in this one. Can you depend on Florida State's defense to hang around in this one a little bit and slow Notre Dame down? But I didn't take it yet, and I am scared. I made Notre Dame about 28.5 in this one, so it would only be a play on the favorite with how bad Florida State has looked, especially offensively. But I passed on this game altogether.
Morning,
Hello,
Vinny.
Vinny.
Morning, kids. What's happening? You guys are doing a great job. I'm learning a lot by just hanging around here. Crew's here. Everybody's good. Great business this morning. Very steady all night. And right up, you can see the lines at the windows and stuff. By the way, I always want to give a shout out to the staff who does a great job. I have to tell you, they not only writing the tickets, but the supervisory staff here at South Point, the team is just terrific, and they do a great job in all shifts. So it's very very smooth, and I have to tell you, you're only as good an operation as your team, and the team here is as good as it gets. So just wanted to make that mention. As far as that game you were talking about, how about this? It's only the Notre Dame is only 3 touchdowns higher this week than they were when we put the games of the year up. Chris Andrews, director here at South Point, when we released them last July. So, it's not to say, well, you guys were wrong. You're right. Look, at the time, that was what it, and it wasn't like it ran one way or the other. It certainly didn't run up to 3.5 touchdowns, but it's always interesting too. And we get asked quite a bit, hey, was that a game of the year? Was that a look ahead? What was it? So that one was far different than what we see right now.
How about that BYU in Utah?
We didn't even use the look ahead. I mean, we had obviously opposites in terms of power ratings. I mean, we had Utah rated the highest in the conference, right? And I mean, they were the conference favorites. And we had obviously Kansas State was highly regarded, but BYU's one of, if not the biggest surprise of the year so far. I mean, actually, we had them positioned to be toward the bottom. I think a lot of folks did. And again, not disrespect. You just look. You look at, especially then, right? When it's the summer, those are the first go round of your power ratings, and so. But it's a great exercise to. And Alex, you did the show with us when we had Paul Stone in and looking at some things, and but it's a good exercise because you want those kinds of opinions, those professional opinions. And listen, it's not about, well, you're right and wrong in it. You have to. It's valuable to do that, and we learned quite a bit about it. And here we are with BYU, very much in the playoff picture.
4 games because we have an Alex extra at the end here.
All right.
Clemson Vatech, I want to hit real quick, Vinny. It's been a slight move to the Hoks in this. Yeah. We're now 6 on this game. Just throw this out there with Clemson, where I overrated them because they beat up on bad teams.
You mean since the Georgia?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And then last week, Louisville, that number ended up getting out of control. I ended up taking Louisville by the time the game kicked, and Louisville won the game outright as an 11-point dog. Mm-hmm. Just this is an interesting one because Vatech, we're waiting if Kyron Jones is able to play or not in this game. And for Clemson, this is, again, Vatech is better than all the teams they've beaten so far this year as well. And that's a brutal place to play, as we know. Yeah,
I mean, this is a big game for Virginia Tech, too, to become bowl eligible, right? Yeah. So, no question that, listen, Clemson responded to that loss to Georgia in the beginning of the season, particularly the second half. But you still have to monitor what they did. We lose two teams in that example, right? We looked at Texas A&M as well. They lost a close game at home to start the season to Notre Dame. Notre Dame is very good. Texas A&M, very good. Their level of competition was far greater, right? They were much more difficult, I should say. There were stronger teams that they played from that first game. And then to last week's a classic example when they got beat by South Carolina. But they had that great run. Clemson had a great run, but against, far less strength of power rating and schedule opponents. So you have to see what the response is for Clemson here, right? But I think it's a difficult spot, especially if Kyron Jones goes, right? I mean, that's going to be the key.
So one interesting that I did dive into with Dabo here. Last year, Clemson did lose 2 in a row, 2 consecutive games. Mm-hmm. Before that, you had to go all the way back to 2011 for them to lose 2 consecutive games. Yep. And then I looked at the point differential and the margin of victory, the median against other FBS teams. So I took out even the cupcake games, right, and the FCS teams. So just against FBS schools, the median was 14.5 points they were winning by. So I like Clemson. I laid the points here. I think this will be a bounce back spot for Dabo and his team. I know they did beat up on bad teams, but I think we'll see a good performance from them today.
No, that's a fair point, Alex. And again, you laid the 6, though, right?
I laid the 6.5, Vinny.
That's
I did
conviction.
not expect
I like
it to go this way. Yeah, well, conviction.
If he doesn't play, if Jones does not play,
right,
it may go higher, it may go back up, and go through the 6.5 too. So, absolutely.
I didn't think he was going either. So we'll see.
Well, let's hit the big game now at Baton Rouge. Vinny, we've talked about this.
Yes. With
this home field advantage at night with LSU. 2.5 on this game. I'm just curious, how do you think this thing moves throughout the day? Bama, of course, favorite on the road in this one.
Well, we did have a blink alert. This thing did touch 3 very
at the beginning of the week, yeah.
And so when it did, that was an automatic take. But a great game here, 4:30 our time. I'm glad that it's late. And by the way, the home field advantage too in Baton Rouge is greater at night. I mean, let's face it. How much more? Well, it's at least a point, maybe 2. I think it depends on the opponent as well. That comes into play, but I think you could easily, add 1 or 2 to the home field advantage. It's as good a setting as there is, and so. But this is a great game. This is a great game to book because everybody wants to bet it in one way or another, whether it's straight first half, second half, in-game parlays, teasers. The total, which is a high total as we see it, 58.5, holding pretty steady, by the way. And if you are inclined to bet the home dog here, we talked about it yesterday with Chris Jeff. Alex, you may sprinkle a little money line at plus $1.20.
I didn't feel as strongly about this dog as I did Ole Miss being at home. I mean, that 3 was very tempting here, but I didn't jump in. I don't have a strong conviction either way. I just worry. I do think Alabama has the better defense, even though LSU's defense has gotten better this year. Yeah. I think this might be a game Bama really gets up for.
Well, and an elimination game, really.
Yes, ball 2 losses.
And we're going to see every week a version. We'll see, elimination games. When you think back a couple of weeks ago, there were, over 30 teams, probably 35 teams mathematically still alive. There's probably, 25 or so right now. So every week there are going to be teams literally eliminated from playoff contention, even with the 12 teams expansion.
I like the underdog in this game. Now, this is
two-way action at the desk. Where's Andy?
This is really just more a play against what I've seen from Alabama since the first half against Georgia.
Haven't been quite the same, have
where they look like, oh my goodness, this team might win a national championship in the first year without Saban that first half against Georgia. And then since then, other than that big play to Williams at the end of that game, they can't complete a pass more than 15 yards, basically. Milroe has just struggled like crazy, at least making explosive plays, which is what has made Jalen Milroe such a great college quarterback. The ability to make explosive plays with both his arm and his legs. It just hasn't happened as much since that touchdown to win the Georgia game to Williams. And for LSU, again, I don't like overrating home field advantages. There's no overrating this one.
No.
At night, this is the best home field advantage in college football.
It's
we already saw it once this year, where in a game where Ole Miss was probably the better team for the majority of the game, LSU found a way to win that game in overtime. And it could be as ugly as that for LSU for a chunk, but I think LSU wins this game. Bama's done it 3 losses. LSU is a nice run to get to 10-2, and 10-2 should be enough to get LSU in the college football playoff. Also, by the way, since their loss was that USC, probably will be enough to get LSU in the SEC title game as well if you win this game here today with 1 loss, since everyone in the SEC has a loss at this point.
Well, whispers that Jalen Milroe wasn't 100% a few weeks ago, and he definitely has looked like that. So
I think he probably wasn't, but maybe a whole year thing with Milroe, even if they're not announcing it. All right. Let's hit 2 more that have Mountain West flair here, Alex.
Yes.
UNLV and Hawaii real quick. 13 in this game now behind us. There's some 12.5 in the market as well with UNLV laying it on the islands here.
So projected rushing yards, UNLV is about double in this game against Hawaii. I do think they're going to be able to run all over them. It makes me a little bit nervous with the travel. You just want to make sure that the team is focused and there for a business trip, but I do like the favorite in this one. I think they'll win by 2 touchdowns. Not a strong play for me by any means.
Up and down, right? 13.5, 14. But right now sitting at 13.50.5. I think this total is going to go up. And you know what's interesting about this game? Usually you would think this would be the last game of the night. It's not. It's a 6 o'clock. It's a kind of a unique start for a game in Hawaii. That's great. The closer is the BYU-Utah game, which is going to do a tremendous amount of business. Yes. Okay, so but this game will as well. And again, as we get further into the day, some carryover will impact it. But I suspect that we'll continue to see two-way action overall on the side, but I think we'll see more over money coming in.
I will just say to Vinny, to that point, check the weather, because now that you just mentioned that, I remember my dad saying something about potential wind in Hawaii that could play.
Yeah, which is more of a factor than rain and precipitation many times.
It looks like 15-mile-an-hour winds. That's what we're looking at here today. So, and again, it's a weird. It's not a real stadium. It's really just a glorified high school stadium they have down there now. So a little more of an impact than you would normally think there in Honolulu. All right, one last one, Alex, before we get out of here, because you again we got to keep the undefeated roll going on these added to the board on the morning of, at least for us. Wazoo's 20.5 at home against Utah State. And we got a nice flat 70 on the total in this game.
And that's what I'm targeting, Jeff. I am going over 70.
There we go.
In this game.
Yeah,
with Utah State and Washington
There you go,
State.
Alex.
Both of them play very quick, and neither of these defenses are very good. Utah State really can't stop a nosebleed. So we're going over 70. It might be the highest total on the board, but I still like it.
Utah State is the worst second quarter defense in the country.
Only second quarter?
Well, that's the one where they're especially bad.
Okay.
Where they give up the most?
Half.
Yeah, they've given up the most points in the country in the second quarter. Wow. So there you go. At least
nice little nugget.
Going through there. All right. That's all we got for you. Vinny, Alex, Sean,
good job.
Drew Dog, good work as always. We're back tomorrow, 9 a.m., getting you ready, and we'll have all the in-game updates for the Giants and the Panthers in Munich as well for you on the show tomorrow morning at 9 right here on Sports by the Book.